Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Monday, May 20th, and the Toronto Blue Jays are coming off yet another series loss. However, Alek Manoah may have made the feelings coming out of the series a little bit better. I'm Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, how are we feeling after Alek Manoah looked like 2022 Alek Manoah yesterday?
Yes, as has been the case with these Toronto Blue Jays, you never really quite know what to feel. But Alek Manoah is certainly doing his part to make things just a little bit nicer heading into the Monday of the long weekend. By the way, happy Victoria Day to all our loyal listeners. Yes, Alek Manoah shoves yesterday and salvages what had initially looked like a not so great series. And now the Blue Jays set for a matinee against the Chicago White Sox.
All hail the Queen. Before we get into kind of the Alek Manoah thing, let's take a look at the series as a whole, because it was an interesting weekend, I would say, in Blue Jays land. They almost get perfect gamed by Tyler Alexander. He's perfect through 7, and then they kind of figure it out and make it a close game that obviously ends up being closer than they probably deserve to have made that game. And then on Saturday, Ross Atkins speaks, and then they take a lead, and then they give up the lead in the 8th inning, and then Alek Manoah obviously shoves, and Daniel Vogelbach nearly hits for the cycle. So just so much to get to, I would say, from the weekend. I mean, starting with the perfect game. What do you like? Apple TV, Tyler Alexander goes 7 perfect, and they fall to 5 games under 500, and just overall not a good performance at all, which also leads to George Springer being moved from the leadoff spot. I mean, how do you feel about like that game kind of fitting into the season?
It kind of fits in perfectly, right? Not to, no pun intended, but this is a team that can't produce offense. And I mean, add Tyler Alexander to the list of how many other names that have befuddled the Blue Jays that barely qualify as starting pitchers when it's said and done. I mean, the Blue Jays looked lost out there, but they've looked lost out there, right? And of course, Alexander with a pretty diverse pitch mix. He's dancing around the Blue Jays hitters and they can't touch him. And I mean, listen, they ultimately don't get perfect games. Davis Schneider saves the day, but I feel like it just feels almost like a more of the same. And why wouldn't it be that, the Blue Jays are on Apple TV on a national broadcast, so to speak, and getting pantsed? It's kind of like, of course, that's what happened.
I'm curious to get your thoughts on this game leading into Ross Atkins' comments. I mean, what a perfect time for him to announce that he's speaking on Saturday morning, and then the team to almost get perfect gamed. Just chef's kiss on the timing. But for him to come out after, and I know people weren't pleased with his comments, and I'm curious, like, what you think that he could have said that would have maybe eased your mind a little bit about the state of the team, or is there even anything that he could have said?
It's so tough to say that there's anything he really, could have said, I guess, short of maybe something to the effect of we're making changes, right? And he even did insinuate that at times about, there were adjustments, but the theme of that press conference was encouragement. And he was encouraged by the hitting. He was encouraged by the management. He was encouraged by the process. He was encouraged by the way his toast tasted that day. Like, this guy could not have been more encouraged by a team that was at the time, I think, 6 games under 500. And yes, this is a team that's probably better than a 500 ball club based on their pure talent level. But Atkins, I think, was pretty milk toast, was pretty non-committal almost in his thoughts on the team. Now, of course, we did get some insight into kind of what was maybe his thought process. There was an interesting quote about, does John Schneider get the final say on the lineup, that I know sports radio picked apart. I don't even know if it's worth doing that, but to me, that press conference was just almost kind of a nothing burger because there's not that much opportunity to say that much stuff. We're 45-ish games into the season. We're way past early, but it's still May, and he's not going to come out there and basically say, we're blowing it up. It's time to move on from this core, because that would kill all of his leverage when you've got 2 months until realistically you have to make a decision on that. So I don't think that there's anything that he could have said that would have necessarily satiated mine or any other, a fan or a commentator or anyone's maybe thoughts on the team. But I don't think he was particularly ambitious in his press conference avail either.
Yeah, I mean, like he could have came out and been like, we're not good enough. But then also, what kind of message does that send to the team, right? I think that he can come out and rip them apart. But again, I don't think that that does a lot of good for your locker room or for you have two players that you probably are considering signing to long-term contract extensions. And if you come out and say, well, we're not good enough, what is that? I mean, they might not want to stay anyways, but that's not going to help that situation at all. And I mean, even if you look at like Danny Jansen, Yusei Kikuchi, Jimmy Garcia, all the other guys that are free agents either this year or the year after. I mean, how are you gonna come out and be like, well, we're not good enough, and then try and sign these guys or like hope that they play better? Like it's a tough spot to be in for him, and I know, like it upsets people the way he talks and everything like that, but I think it's just I actually thought he sounded a little bit more like a human than he has in some of the other times than that he's talked.
I think he's taken a couple of lessons from a couple of old friends, Mal and Eric. But if you know, you know. But I mean, like, listen, he's not going to lay out the plan because he's never been a guy that lays out the plan. So I don't think he's necessarily safe in his job. I think there's still a lot of uncertainty. I think there's a lot of stuff still shifting under his feet. But I'm not really convinced there was much for Atkins to really divulge that he could have divulged.
Yeah, I pulled a couple quotes here and I'm just gonna run them by you and get kind of you just give me like a snap reaction to this quote and what you think. So the first one I think this is like the most headliney quote that he said, and he said, "We believe in this talent. There is time left, but there's a massive sense of urgency, and we need to get it turned around soon."
It's a headliner, but I mean, nothing he says in there is particularly groundbreaking. I mean, yeah, you've got to turn it around soon. You're hovering under 500 and you're last place in the American League East. I mean, forget winning the division. You're chasing a wild card at this point, right? So, I mean, snap reaction, no kidding.
Okay, okay, next one. We presently feel that the best contributions that could create change in run scoring are going to come from within our clubhouse or AAA with the players that are here, but the dialogue is set steady on the alternatives that being trades could happen.
The comment about AAA is probably the most compelling part of that, I
He
would
he went
guess,
hard on like AAA in the presser.
which is okay. Listen, you've got Nathan Lucas who's raking. You've got Arelvis Martinez who's slowed down a little bit, is still hitting pretty well. You've got a couple of other guys that are hitting pretty well. I believe it was Stuart Baroa is up in AAA and has been hitting well as well of late. So like you've got options. Addison Barger, we saw very briefly, continues to hit the stuffing out of the ball in AAA. Like there are, of course, options, but I think it's almost the same problem that the Blue Jays kind of had last year, in that there's there's guys in AAA that you maybe like, but there's not much reason to have them either play kind of part-time in the majors when they can get full-time reps in AAA. Or the other thing, as was the case last year, these kind of floor guys that they have, they're good enough that, swapping them out for a AAA guy, most of the time, you're not getting a substantial difference in production. Now, of course, you've got a guy like Orelvis Martinez, who, mind you, is maybe a ways away, but his ceiling is probably the highest of anybody on this team, not named, Guerrero, Bichette, or potentially Davis Schneider, but even that might be going a step too far. So it's still this kind of, you can slot in a Nathan Lucas, but how marginally better is he going to be than Kevin Kiermaier, than, dare I say, George Springer?
I want to get your opinion on this because I talked about this on the radio the other day. And how do you value like getting everyday at bats for players? Like if you look at Spencer Horwitz, he's 26. Nathan Lucas, he's 29. Will Robertson, he's 26. Stuart Baroa, he's 25. Like how much opportunity cost are you really taking away from these guys to develop by taking away everyday at bats, right? Like is Spencer Horwitz really at the point where he needs everyday at bats, or is it okay to look at him and say, well, on a bad team, he probably deserves a shot at being like an everyday first baseman. But on the Toronto Blue Jays, is it okay to be like, we're gonna stunt his development, even though is there any development left for him by bringing him up and putting him on the bench in the Daniel Vogelbach role?
Well, that's the thing, is how different is he production wise going to be in an every couple of days role as a 26th man lefty compared to Daniel Vogelbach? I mean, the theoretical upside on Vogelbach is you can bring him in and he can hit for some power. That's not something that Spencer Horwitz ultimately affords your team. Now, realistically, the Blue Jays are a team that lacks power. So the upside of Daniel Vogelbach and all of his struggles are more compelling to me almost than Spencer Horwitz, who in theory might be a better hitter. And if you want him a better hitter, if you want the better hitter there, then of course you want him. But like the margins on those two, it's almost barely worth
Yeah.
mentioning. Now, of course, I mean, there might be another name coming down the pipeline, and we'll get to him in due time when we talk a little bit more about Vogelbach. But like they're gonna have some decisions to make regardless about the situation with Vogelbach, who suddenly has emerged as a viable's not even the word. He had one really exciting game.
Yeah, we can look at that game. I just have I kind of like one last point and on the Horwitz Vogelbach thing, and I mean like the Vogelbach's ability to change, like you talked about, he has the power to change the game with one swing, right? And Horwitz, where his value comes from, is being like an on base guy who has great control of the strike zone. I mean, Vogelbach has great control of the strike zone as well, but I like the Horwitz value is him being on base all the time. And as a part time player, you don't give him the chance to be on base all the time because he's not really playing that much, right? So you cut into the value of him as a player by keeping him on the bench. So I think you're right where like Vogelbach is probably the better option in that spot. I'm curious. Like I would love to know what their thoughts are on like somebody's development where they've proven that they can obviously be a AAA hitter, like basically too good for AAA at this point. And how much more can you develop a 26-year-old who should be playing in the major leagues?
There's a word for that. It's a quadruple A player. I mean, that's just kind of what they have, which I mean, it's better to have quadruple A players than guys that can't even, crack it in the high minors. But yeah, you've got a bunch of dudes that are kind of betweener type maybes. And sure, you could just kind of plop them in and see if they work and see if they don't. But it's you win on the margins. You definitely don't lose on the margins most of the time. I'd say you lose generally because of a lack of talent. And this Blue Jays team, for all the talent they seem to have, seem to be losing a lot of ball games.
All right, let's move on to the game yesterday because it was a day for the big boys at the Rogers Center. Alek Manoah, obviously we already kind of touched on it. He absolutely shoved, and that gives him 2 straight starts where he's thrown 7 innings and allowed 0 earned runs. And I think this one was even better than the Twins start. Obviously, like the home run in the Twins start gave him 3 runs against, and this time he just allowed 1 hit, 1 walk, struck out 7. He did hit 2 guys, as you might expect from Alek Manoah, but I think the best sign for me was a little bit of the swagger was back, the confidence was back, and it looked like he was like really kind of it feeling good on the mound, which I don't think we've seen from him in a very, very long time.
Did you see? I think it was against Isak Paredes. The little point to the I'm in your head. I'm in your head. Did you
I didn't
see?
see that.
Did you
No.
see that? I think it was Isak Paredes. There was definitely there was some at bat. He struck him out and was walking off the mound and did a little bit of this. That I think is the Alek Manoah that finished top 3 in Cy Young. Yeah, it's 7 strikeouts. You didn't strike out the world, but I mean, about as close to a gem as you're gonna get, right? Like this is Alek Manoah that Blue Jays fans have been waiting for.
I mean, and he hasn't even ever been like a huge strikeout guy, right? So like 7 Ks through 7 innings, like that's more than you even got from him in that Cy Young finisher year. So I think the Rays offense has been like good slash bad this year, but like I think that like 2 starts in a row, excuse me, against American League playoff contending teams. And I like what else can you ask from him in this spot? Like you know, if he is again, I don't think he's going to be 2022 Alek Manoah going forward, but at least he's looking like he is a major league starter.
Yeah, this is something that I think 3 or 4 starts ago, I think I was on air saying he might be a roster crunch candidate at this rate, right? Like
Yeah.
he had just looked terrible against the Nationals, and sure he had options and sure this and that, but like he was kind of reaching the end of his rope, and all of a sudden these 14 innings have just completely changed the complexion on his season. Really, I mean, all of a sudden he looks like a guy that is a big leaguer, and that's really important. And I think the really interesting thing is that the start he struggled. I think he might have thrown 1, 2 changeups. Like he didn't use his changeup at
Yeah,
all.
the changeup stuff is
And
interesting.
it's evolved. Something's happened here where he's using all 4 pitches and it's working. I mean, yesterday they talked about it in the post game where I think it was Arden Zwelling that mentioned that he had a strikeout with all 4 of his pitches. He had a couple with his fastball. He had some with a couple with his slider for sure. Uh, and picked up one with the changeup and ended his day, I believe, with the sinker up in the zone. So I mean, command is what it is with Manoah, but still got one with all 4 pitches, which is something that is, I think, is probably the most encouraging thing from the ball game yesterday.
Yeah, no disagreement whatsoever. I think if you don't look at that start as like a significant positive sign, a significant step forward, then maybe you're just a hater if you're looking for things that
Did
to
well, I was just gonna say, did you see the talking baseball tweet? Because
yeah,
everybody
I
in the
did see that.
replies
Yeah,
was having at it. I
yeah.
mean, listen, John Boy is very good at what he does. That much we don't need to reiterate. But I mean, any Blue Jays fan's gonna get a little bit of, call it Schadenfreude, call it whatever you want, with Manoah cooking and a little bit of talking baseball love.
Let me just on the changeup, like he has thrown it 20 times to left-handed batters this year, has given up 1 hit on it. Players are it was a home run that he gave up on it. Wow. Oh, that was the home run that he gave up. Oh no, sorry, he gave up a couple other home runs. But anyway, so changeup, 143 average against 222 XBA, 571 slug, of course, with the home run, 463 X slug, and then 299 WOBA, 285 X WOBA. So
Like that's a
like
that's a pitch.
that's
But that
yeah,
wasn't a pitch a couple of years ago. So I
yeah.
don't know where this changeup has come from, but he's clearly added it to his arsenal or changed it a little bit, and it's suddenly become a weapon.
Yeah, really, really, really interesting,
I
actually, I
would I
think.
would be curious his slider. How does that look relative? Because of course his changeup has suddenly become a pitch that he can use in spots, especially against lefties. The slider was his bread and butter at his best. How has that looked?
Yeah, it hasn't been as good. So hitters are hitting 417 against the slider, 387 xBA, which obviously is still very good, 917 slug, 793 x slug, which are both very high, 584 woba, 514 x woba. So not as good on the slider, which I mean, I do wonder, like you might have to dive into game by game to kind of look at that because I feel like his slider got rocked in the national start for sure. So maybe it just wasn't as sharp in that game, and he, has maybe kind of figured it out in the last couple. But it's interesting to see that the slider definitely hasn't been all that great. I'm just kind of looking at the movement here, and I know that he's talked about like manipulating a little bit more and kind of like trying to get some more depth or some more vertical movement on it, and not just focusing for the huge horizontal like sweepy slider. And the horizontal movement again it's like it's better than it was last year, but it's still down from 21 21 22.
So I don't know, just a couple of things just to maybe keep in mind. Just interesting how his excuse me, how his pitch mix has kind of changed as he's had to change.
Yeah, do you want to know the stuff plus on each of his pitches so far?
I mean, give it to me, give it to me.
I ask you, do you want to? Because you probably don't. But
Oh,
overall stuff plus 85, stuff plus on the changeup 76, stuff plus on the slider 89, stuff plus on the sinker 81, and stuff plus on the fastball 90.
I remain perplexed. I just remain perplexed.
So yeah, so I mean, to me, I mean, for people that aren't familiar with Stuff Plus is on the same scale as WRC Plus, on the same scale as OPS Plus. Like 100 is around average, and you obviously want your stuff to play above 100 for sure. Like Jordan Romano's Stuff Plus is 132. Stuff Plus is a little more connected to results for relievers than it is for starters. So, I mean, Kevin Gossman has a 99 Stuff Plus this year, or 98, excuse me, which I mean, probably eye test wise, I would say that actually kind of makes sense. But for Manoah, like the changeups are always graded weird in Stuff Plus. And for guys who don't throw super hard, like they already are limited by Stuff Plus. So, I mean, who do you want to compare Alek Manoah to at this point?
Well, it's the question is do you want to compare him to 2023 Manoah, or do you want to compare him sorry, do you want to compare him to 2022 Manoah, right? Because those are also just two different
Yeah,
pitchers,
so
right?
yeah, so 2022 Manoah, his stuff plus was 100 and location plus was 100. Fastball was 100, sinker was 86, slider was 118,
Totally
and
different pitch.
changeup was 89. So yeah, slider totally different. Yeah, I don't think that, sometimes you don't need to be the stuffiest pitcher to succeed, but I do think that maybe does give us a little bit of a look under the hood that the the stuff hasn't quite been there.
The he's back stuff might be premature. I guess I'd say is the big takeaway if you want to kind of strip away a couple of layers. But to me, it does seem like these are the most encouraging steps we've seen from Manoah since basically his Cy Young candidacy year. I don't think that much is an egregious take.
No, no, not at all. And I mean, like these were his best two starts in two years. And yes, the stuff the stuff plus numbers look bad, but I'm not even like concerned about that. Like somebody, you can kind of look around at like some of the other pitchers. Like there's guys who have success that don't have great stuff plus numbers for starters, right? Like Reese Olson is a guy who's a 91 stuff plus. Like I just kind of pulled up the list. Like Max Fried is at 97, Aaron Nola's a 97, and like I think the more pitches we get from him, the more those numbers will probably go up. Also, well, let's move on unless you have anything else on Alek. I think encouraging sign, and he's got who does he got next time out? He'll probably be in that Tiger series, which should be another decent matchup for him.
A good test for him. And of course, if I recall correctly, the last time he faced the Tigers was when he made his first return to the big leagues, unless there's been another start against the Tigers I'm forgetting. So a chance at redemption, even though everyone was kind of at the time like, oh, it was a great start. Little did we know, of course, what was to follow. All right, let's move
Yeah.
along here. Let's talk a
Yeah.
little bit
So
minor ball.
well, I mean, I was gonna do Vogelbach because he
Oh,
was
of
he was
course.
he was
Well,
I mean in this Manoah game, he nearly hits for the cycle, goes I believe it was 3 for 4 with a double, a home run, and a single, and of course the solo shot. So um he scores 3 runs in the game, and it's funny because he took 3 swings in the game, and Arden kind of talked about that on the game, the post game or whatever. But it's a very interesting profile for him, and I just want to know, like, do you think that he's a guy who we see like get hot? He's played a lot more recently, and the results really haven't been there. But this game was a big step, I think.
no, an enormous step. I think he's going to have to get hot. And the reason I had said minor ball was because, of course, Joey Votto has suddenly sprung to life, right? We got that story from David Singh just over the weekend that he's approaching game action in the minor leagues. He had discussed, obviously, being very patient with the Blue Jays. And I think that's actually, interestingly, that's kind of a luxury he was afforded because he's so late kind of in his career, and he is at this stage where he earns that benefit of the doubt. And if he comes back before he's ready and sucks, his career is done. So, there's a logical
Yeah.
string of thought here as to why he was maybe a little bit more patient than someone that was maybe 29 instead of 39 might have been with the rolled ankle. Now, of course, if Vogelbach stays hot, there just won't be room for Votto. But it kind of does have to, it has to happen. Like Vogelbach, we had this window where he kind of had, call it exclusive rights to the lefty off the bench role. But if he continues to be on and off and most of the time be off, then you've got Votto sitting in the minor leagues ready to go. So I think that for Vogelbach, he has to get hot. He has to turn this into an extended run of successful plate appearances. Now, how much time he's going to get in terms of actual plate appearances maybe is a different question, but he's got to get hot.
Yeah, really convenient timing for Vogelbach to pop off in a game, and I wonder how much that's connected. I know Keegan he tweeted before the game that he had the feeling that Vogelbach was gonna hit the shit out of a baseball, and obviously he does that, and then Keegan tweets after, he's like, well, I saw him putting in some extra work or whatever. So it's interesting that Vogelbach maybe is starting to feel the heat a little bit around this Joey Votto time. So some internal competition never hurts, I would say. I think having those guys like have feel like, oh, I could actually lose my spot is a decent driver of success sometimes.
I mean, he's a 26th man.
Yeah,
So
he shouldn't feel all that comfortable.
exactly, right? It's not like he's a staple in the lineup. It's not like he's got a hammer lock on the first base spot, because you've got Vlad Guerrero Jr., who is very much the Blue Jays first baseman. So there's not a ton of surprise that he maybe feels the heat. And it's maybe not the worst thing that he feels the heat.
Yeah. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on this too, because we've seen Vogelbach actually like start to play a lot more recently, and that seems maybe a little bit tied to Justin Turner's struggles. Who Justin Turner all of a sudden has a WRC plus below 100 amid like just an awful stretch for him. I think he is.
He
Let me
was
just
0 for 25 last I heard. I believe that's where he's at right now, but I mean, we talked about it, I think, last episode with the swing speed stuff. Like this cliff
did we
kind
talk?
of.
So this was something that I looked up, and I can't remember if we talked about it or not. Did we talk about Turner's bat speed actually already slowing down month to month?
Yes, yes, we did discuss that. Which, and then on the opposite side of that, we talked about a guy like Springer, who I think was trending in the right direction, right? So the athleticism of a 39-year-old, it turns out it's hard to maintain over a 162 game sample size. So for Turner, he's going to have to bust out of this slump. And he was one of the guys, if not the only guy, that had come alive with the bat back in April. So he gets a little bit more, call it leeway at the moment. But I mean, it's just kind of another case of a Blue Jay stick going cold.
I I want so at the end of April, he had a sorry, let me find it again here, a 153 WRC plus. What do you think his WRC plus has been in May
Well,
for him
oh
to
my
drop
God.
below 100?
It's gotta be in the 70s range, I think. If my math is correct, maybe lower. Is it in like the 50 range?
50 range is correct if you toss a negative in front of it.
Wow. Whoa. Whoa.
In May, he has a 0 or a 0.098 OBP.
That's bad.
In May he is 3 for 40 with one walk, and all 3 hits are singles.
That's bad. That's very bad.
Yep. Yep. Not ideal there for Justin. So again, like that's a really tough one because he's like your guy that you bring in to kind of be the offensive boost. And obviously he has not done that. But like when do you get like I would say like I'd be concerned about that already. But like when do you get really concerned about that?
Well, sorry. Here's a question for you. Obviously, the hits have not been falling, but what are we looking at as far as strikeout rate and walk rate? Because that I think
Yeah.
is a bigger indicator of whether or
So
not Justin Turner has lost it.
strikeout rate is actually down in May from April. So in April or March/April, it was 18.3, and in May it's 12.2. In March and April, walk rate was 10.1, and in May, walk rate is 8.4.
So,
8.4. It's 2.4.
oh, okay, big difference.
He only has one walk
Yeah.
in May.
The walk rate stuff, there's no faking that. That obviously is an issue. He's presumably, I would imagine, been chasing more, but I think this is probably just a case of the contact drying up. If I were to guess, if the strikeout rate's down, if the walk rate's down, he's evidently, I would say, putting the bat on the ball at a higher rate, but he's not hitting it hard, which turns out that when you've got one of the lowest swing speeds in baseball, there's not a lot of room for error when it comes to swing speed, when it comes to making contact with the ball. So I think for me, with regards to Turner, the concern level is elevated, but not to the point necessarily where I would be ringing alarm bells in the same way last year at this time. I was saying that Brandon Belt wouldn't be a Blue Jay by June 1st.
Yeah, so I mean, just looking at it, like the chase rate is up for him. The contact rate, like I wouldn't say that it's up, it's like trending up a little bit. What else are we looking at here? Swing percentage is also he's swinging more, he's chasing more, and he's I guess making contact like a little bit more. So like take from that what you will. One thing that I'm curious for, and I'm just trying to see if I can pull it up here, is how often pitchers are throwing him pitches in the zone.
you would think it's probably down, right? Because he was doing damage last last month. And since that has ceased to be and he's chasing more, you'd figure there's been an adjustment.
Yeah, so at the beginning, yeah, pitchers are just kind of giving him the "I'm just going to pound the zone against you" treatment. Well, maybe not even
Oh, they
because it's
are or
still
they're not.
no that well, it's the line is going up. So early in the season, he wasn't seeing a lot of strikes, and now he's starting to see more strikes. It's still not a ton. It's still like around 48%, which is below average. But I do wonder if like the game plan there is people are like, well, he's not going to hurt us that much in the zone. Like kind of like the Kevin Biggio thing where you're like, well, we're not afraid of him hitting the ball out of the yard against us. I mean, he does have 4 home runs on the year, so
You're kind of
depends on
right.
how you
No, they're
feel
kind
about
of
that.
right. I mean,
Like
I don't know.
I do wonder if they're just like, yeah, we're just gonna attack the zone against him and make him beat us because one, he obviously doesn't have the bat speed to do that, and two, like it hasn't been going well. So they are maybe just deciding we're not going to walk him and we're just going to attack him.
Yeah, I think we'll get a better idea of Turner and kind of what he realistically is, because he certainly wasn't the guy with the OPS over 1,000, and he certainly, I don't think, is this guy because he's Justin Turner. He's not gonna just lose it, right? Now, exactly where in between those he lies, I guess we'll kind of see. But I still maintain a significant degree of confidence in Justin Turner and what he's capable of for this team. Not going to be your cleanup guy. I think that much is, no one would have said that at the beginning of the year, but should still be in the mix for regular DH spots.
Yes, yes. Okay, let's move on because before we get to the White Sox series, a couple of like minor league points that we didn't talk about. Arjun Nimala has been moved to the development list, so he's not playing in low A anymore. And Aaron Sanchez also moved to the development list after it a second or a third not great start with the Buffalo Bisons. Do you want to start with Sanchez or Nimala?
Yeah. Let's start with Sanchez here because I think there's maybe a little bit less to dig into almost. Of course, brought back by the Blue Jays, old friend, and it's not gone so great to start. Listen, at this stage, he is a depth piece. I don't think that there was a universe that he started for the Blue Jays this season, barring something completely unforeseen, or if he completely forced the Blue Jays' hand. Now, I kind of think as well that this stint on the development list is almost like a reset and give it another go opportunity for Sanchez, because right now there's no chance he's going to be pitching for the Blue Jays as things currently stand. So it's an opportunity for him to maybe shuffle some things around and maybe get his legs under him, because I think your only other option would have basically been releasing him because he's clearly not good enough for AAA as it stands right now.
He has 7 walks and 2 strikeouts in 7 1/3 innings and 12 runs against.
Yeah, not good enough. Just not good enough. And listen, like a minor league signing, a low leverage, low stakes, largely meaningless. If this was anybody else, nobody would care. Like this is this year's Drew Hutchison signing,
But worse.
but worse. This is not a guy that's going to be pitching for the Blue Jays unless at least 5 to 7 dudes hit the injured list. It's not happening.
I
Okay,
tweet
you're chuckling.
I tweet
Continue.
no, I'm just laughing at how many guys would have to get hurt for Aaron Sanchez to pitch.
Well, like listen, like you'd have to lose probably 3 rotation guys. You lost Yariel Rodriguez, and depending on who you ask, you lost Bowden Francis. So that brought Manoah into the fold, because goodness knows that Manoah wasn't going to be in the fold. But even because Sanchez, like, is Sanchez starting for you? I guess, because the idea is he's got some length because he's not coming out of the bullpen for you. And think about how many bullpen guys would, in theory, have to go down. You'd probably have to lose a Rays level of arms to have him realistically pitch. No,
I'm just looking at like the guys in AAA who have started like at least a game. And you know, like Troy Watson and Paxton Schultz should probably get a major league shot before Aaron Sanchez does.
yeah, like this is a guy that was. I mean, maybe it's like the pitching version of the Joey Votto signing. Maybe it's a goodwill signing.
Like honestly, to me, I would rather like sign Zach Greinke before going to Aaron Sanchez.
Yeah, but Zach Greinke's not pitching for AAA Buffalo.
No, no, I mean he's actually been pitching in Arizona recently against the Diamondbacks, some Diamondbacks minor leaguers or something, I believe I saw. So hey, bring him in if you need a starter. Bring in Zach Greinke.
Listen, it certainly can't be as bad as 7 walks in 7 innings. I'll say that much.
If how many strikeouts do you think that he would have needed to had in those 7 1/3 innings to make the 7 walks okay?
He would have needed probably, probably 2 or 3 strikeouts an inning or something
Yeah,
egregious
like
like
I'm thinking
that,
like
right?
if he had like 19 strikeouts in 7 1/3, that those walks would maybe be okay. But
Yeah, I something tells me Aaron Sanchez doesn't have that in his bag these days.
I think I can't remember if I saw it correctly, but I think he's only gotten 2 whiffs in the 2 starts.
Yeah, needless to say, Aaron Sanchez probably will not be seeing much of him anytime soon. Let's move on to maybe the little bit more interesting story with the Blue Jays and their development. It's Arjun Namala headed to the development list.
Yeah, so I mean, interesting where he has severely struggled in low A this year. He's hitting 167, 75 WRC plus, 280 OBP, 306 slug, strikeout rate approaching 35%. Obviously young for the level. He had 3 home runs. ISO was okay. Like he had a handful of extra base hits. He had 108 at bats through 29 games, and it sucks that they had to kind of were forced to make that decision. But for him being young for the level, I mean, they did challenge him by starting him there. But I mean, if you want to challenge somebody, like you probably want to think that they're like ready for the challenge, right?
Yeah, no, and I don't think that necessarily he wasn't ready for the challenge, right? Like this is a guy that by all accounts is a really talented ball player, right? It's just a matter of fact. Listen, he's 18 years old. Most guys at this stage are still in rookie ball. He doesn't turn 19 until after the season. This is a full age 18 season. So yeah, of course you put him in low A and he's going to struggle against guys that are 20, maybe even a couple of 21-year-olds. Right now, he is your first round pick. You would have liked to see more success out of him. And I do think that there is a lot to be gleaned from the power being, it seems like legit, right? He hit a couple of bombs. So I am encouraged by that. But I just think it might just be a case of him being overmatched. He's coming from high school. He was the best player on his team. But I mean, this is a guy that maybe wasn't ready for college ball or ready for like a prominent role kind of on one of those teams. So it's just the nature of the beast type of thing. And he'll be back in a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two. And I would not be shocked to see him have success. I just to me, way too early to give up on the talent.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. I've definitely not given up on your first round pick from last year. And I mean, like you can kind of see the raw tools, right? Like I think he almost was leading that team in batted ball events of 100 miles per hour or more. Just kind of like the whiff rate stuff has been not great, and that was kind of the book on him coming out was like he had decent command of the strike zone, but swings and misses a little bit.
Yeah.
So
And also, like, just very quickly, like last year, obviously in an extremely small sample size, played in the Florida Complex League,
complex.
excuse me, not Florida Coast League, Florida Complex League, you know, at an 820 OPS. So like fit in fine. Only a what is it, 40 plate appearance sample size, a lot of walks. But, you know, I think to me, like there's nothing wrong with giving this guy a tough look in Dunedin, and he's
Yeah.
in Dunedin. He can just shuffle down the road to the development complex, and he'll be just fine.
Yeah, not a lot of concern. I just want to pull this up before we move on super quick and just kind of where he ranks among the it kind of sucks because on Baseball Savant, like we can get like some of the Statcast data for low A and triple A, but none of the other minor league teams. So anyways, balls hit above 100. He has 11 of them, which ranks him 14th between the AAA team and the low A team.
Yeah, like that's good. That's one of the youngest guys in your system destroying baseballs at a clip that's pretty pronounced. So I think still like the tools he showed them, and
Yeah.
it's just a matter of just pushing him a little bit harder than maybe he was ready for, which
I don't mind.
that's life,
I'm
that's
I'm
baseball.
always I'm always on the side of like push guys a little bit harder anyways.
And can listen, can the downside is this: he struggles, you put him in the development complex, comes back, and you see how he finishes the season. Could you imagine if he hit where he would have been? Because if he hits in low A, he rockets up prospect rankings.
Yeah.
So the downside to me was minimal. It's just, okay, we pushed you a little too hard and we'll just lay off and
Just give you a break, yeah.
run it back next year when presumably he'll be a little bit more ready, a little bit more advanced for the level, and will presumably have more success.
I wonder if he'll be a Vancouver guy.
You would think so.
I mean, because I think Vlad and Bo both skipped Vancouver, right?
No, I don't think. Well, actually, no. But at the time, Vancouver was low A, so that would be why they skipped Vancouver's, because
Ah,
they rocketed up the minor leagues. They started it in Lansing, and then they went off to Dunedin, and then you went to, because Dunedin at the time would have been high A,
to New Hampshire, yeah.
and then New Hampshire, and then of course brief stops in Buffalo.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Let's move on to this week because this is the Blue Jays' time to figure it out. They have the next 2 weeks against the Chicago White Sox, Detroit Tigers, Chicago White Sox again, and then Pittsburgh Pirates. How important is this stretch to their season?
The most important stretch of their season. This is teams that you should feast on. You should win probably 2/3 of these games. And these are not teams that are playoff teams. The Tigers are the closest thing resembling a playoff team amongst this group. And they have been thoroughly middling. They are right around 500. Their run differential is right around even. It's a team that you are going to have to beat if you are going to be a team that competes for a wild card, because they are a team right now ahead of you, I think, in the standings,
Yep.
but on pure, call it talent level, should not be. So the Blue Jays are going to have to win all of these games, and that's going to start, well, not all, but they're going to have to win the bulk of these games, and that's going to start against the Chicago White Sox, who, as has been documented, have not been a good ball team this year.
Yeah, I mean, so before we kind of dive into the White Sox stuff, 13 games against in the next 2 weeks against these teams, against Chicago, Detroit, Chicago, and Pittsburgh. If it goes poorly, do you think that is kind of where they draw the line?
It's probably going to have to be, because if you cannot do damage against these central division teams, then you're clearly not cut out to be a team that competes in a much more competitive division in the American League East, right? You're in the toughest division in baseball. So if you intend to compete, be good, this is teams that you're going to have to beat.
Like you probably have to win each series, right? And if they win each series, that's 9-4. And amazingly, 9-4 gets them to 500. But ideally, you probably want to do a 10-3 or an 11-2 in those 13 games.
If this team doesn't come out of this stretch at least 8-5, I think you're probably done here.
If they're still 500 after it, you think that's
I think that's kind of, you have to be hovering around 500, and if you're not hovering around 500,
Of
and
course,
it's
my 9-4 math is totally wrong. Anyways, oh no, is that because that
no,
would
no,
be
they're
yeah,
they're
yeah,
20, they're
they're
20 and
5 games
5,
under. Yeah,
9 and 4 would get them to 29 and
yeah,
29.
yeah,
They have to basically get to 500 because that gets you to the 60 game mark. You have 100 games left to try to win 50 of them, basically, or no more, win 60 of them, right?
yeah.
You got to go 60 and 40 to end the season if you go 500 in the stretch. And this team has not been a 600 ball club since, gosh, who knows, right? So, like,
Yeah.
you're running out of time. And if you're
I
not
think
500 at the end of the stretch, it kind of tells me that this is not the year.
I think the hope would be that you play like you do well in this stretch, right? And it lets you kind of build a little bit of momentum and then go into the rest of your season after like playing well against those teams, right? And even if you look after, like they go once they're done with Pittsburgh, then they got Baltimore and then they got Oakland. So like I would say maybe the Oakland series is the kind of the line in the sand as to where you know what this team is going to be. Like this stretch, they need to get to either one game below 500 or get back to 500 to save the season almost.
Yeah, they've got to get hot. We'll see if they can do it. I mean, tonight's as good a night as any, but like you're gonna have to turn it around at some point. And as far as gifts from the baseball gods, this is about as Christmas as it gets.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Let's get into the White Sox a little bit because man, they are, well, I mean, they're quite the baseball team. Tommy Pham has like saved their season a little bit. They have been playing better recently, but that's not an excuse at all. They're still a bad team. They just got swept by the Yankees. Um like they're running out dudes that probably should, like they would love to have Spencer Horwitz on their roster.
Oh, for sure. Listen, the White Sox are not a good team. Like, don't know how much more you can really say as far as the talent on their roster. They have
Yeah.
some guys, Garrett Crochet, maybe has stumbled a little bit of late, but came out of the gate roaring hot and is still a strikeout machine. Looks like a potential ace of the future for them. The Blue Jays
Yeah.
get Garrett Crochet in game 2 in a lefty-lefty matchup, and we'll get through the probables and all that stuff in a moment. But like they have some pieces. Eric Fetty has turned into a nice piece for them as well. They've got a couple of bullpen or rotation, guys. On the hitting side, it's a bit of a wasteland, maybe, which isn't ideal, but still got to win the games in front of you.
Yeah.
And I mean, neither of these teams have really done that, but maybe the White Sox to a bit more of an acute degree.
Yeah. I mean, probables for the series today, it's Eric Fetty and Jose Barrios. Tomorrow, as you mentioned, Garrett Crochet and Yusei Kikuchi. And then on Wednesday, it is Mike Clevenger and Chris Bassett. So, the Fetty and Crochet is like obviously probably Chicago's two best pitchers, and they are Crochet, like the ERA isn't great, but everything else is. And Fetty has been, like you said, like incredible in his return from Korea, and like kind of funny how nice that signing worked out for them. Um, but yeah, like this is one where you probably look at your offense really hoping to get going a little bit.
Yeah, and I would expect that the Blue Jays are internally thinking the same thing. This is not the toughest team that you're about to square off against. And of course, excuse me, you've got the top of the rotation, but by no means are these guys aces.
Yeah. Yeah. They're gettable. Well, I'll say it that way.
Yeah, I think gettable is a good way to put it.
Yeah. All right, let's before we go, a little bit of Con coming to town with the Chicago White Sox and Calgary's own Michael Soroka, who was traded to the White Sox this offseason and has struggled, I think is a fair way to put it. He has been moved to the bullpen. He had given up runs in every single one of his starts this year and only given up three or less 3 times. So they moved him to the bullpen, where he found some success in his first time out. He threw 4 innings, Against the New York Yankees, only gave up 2 hits in that. No runs. He walked 4, but he also struck out 7 and had his velo jump at the beginning of the outing. And then, as you might expect, as it went along, it kind of returned. So, um, not nice to see him succeed. And obviously, like you'd want him to kind of stay as a rotation piece, but and nice to have the success. And obviously, coming into the series, like he's like hasn't had the best season and is maybe we'll see him kind of go like that multi-inning relief role.
Yes, this is a Canadian baseball podcast. Nice to see Michael Soroka, excuse me, have some success for sure. If he can turn the season around, might be a nice guy to move at a deadline type thing. Maybe becomes a bullpen arm, maybe find success in that role, but wishing him obviously nothing but the best and hoping that he has some success. And would really love to see him this series because we all know what he's capable of. We saw it back in his Atlanta days, which are ancient history, but for him to find a gear in his move to the bullpen, I think is a really nice thing to see, at least as far as Canadian baseball goes.
Yeah, I think I watched his availability after that Yankees outing, and he was asked, "What does that tell you?" And he's like, "Well, that I still got it." So I think that's good for kind of like same thing as Alek Manoah, right? Like you get the good outing under your belt, and then you go from there. And yeah, I mean, unless you have anything else on this White Sox series, like I don't think that we can kind of overstate just how important it is for the Blue Jays to have success, win the series, maybe sweep the series. But yeah, I think again, this is probably the stretch that decides what direction the season goes.
And I guess on that note, first pitch flies around three
Yes.
ish.
Yes.
So, so
Early Victoria Day start. We'll yeah, let's get out of here so that we can get this up before the game starts. Thank you so much for listening today to the Bird's Eye View podcast. Make sure you drop a follow or review wherever you get your pods. Make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. We're there at Bird's Eye View Pod. Check us out on Substack. We are also there at Bird's Eye View Podcast. You can follow us all on Twitter. The pod is at BEV_pod. Jori is at J Negin-Shecter, and I am at Worden_Zach. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the games this week.